I believe it's time. Long, long ago, there were no stories in the world. Life was hard for the people, especially in the summer, when they had to gather all their food for winter and prepare their villages and homes for the cold, cold months ahead. One girl's job was to gather berries in the heat of the afternoon when they were full of their rich, powerful medicine. On this day, as she traveled home with her baskets filled to the brim with these beautiful berries, she grew tired and chose to rest in the shade of a beautiful cedar orchard. She'd no more sat down her baskets than she heard a deep, rumbly voice.
I shall now share a story.
Oh my gosh, the girl jumped up and looked all around. She looked everywhere. She looked and looked and looked. She couldn't see anyone anywhere. She called out, "Who are you? Who are you?"
I am the story-sharing cedar tree.
Oh, at first the voice seemed to come from within the earth, but it was a cedar tree speaking. That was new.
I shall now share a story.
Well, get on with it, said the girl, wondering what a story might even be.
First, you must share something with me.
Oh, so the girl took a handful of her most delicious berries and placed them on a low-hanging branch. Now share your story, grandfather. And the story-sharing tree began telling the wonderful story of how Earth was created. As she listened, the girl was refreshed, and the fragrance and beautiful aroma of the cedar grove enlightened her spirit as well. When the story tree was done, the girl said, "Thank you. I will take this story home with me and share it with my family, and I will come back again tomorrow." And it was with a happy heart that she headed home. She told her people something wonderful had happened. They all gathered around in a community circle, and she told them the story she'd heard from the story-sharing cedar tree. Well, as they listened, the people's worries seemed to drift away. That night they dreamed good dreams and slept very well. So the next day the girl went straight back to the tree and handed another bunch of berries.
I shall now share a story.
Oh my gosh. And she took this story home with her too, listened well and memorized it and took it home. It went on like this for the whole summer. Every day the girl would appear with her handful of wild berries, and the tree would tell her a story of the olden times. She heard stories of talking animals and giant monsters. She heard stories of what it was like when the earth was new. They were important stories, and they had important lessons. And she took them home each night to her family, and she shared her stories around the community circle. It was sort of like story time with the young girl. Well, this went on all the way until early autumn, when the girl placed her gift of berries. The tree suddenly didn't speak. "Oh, please tell me another story," she said. "One more story, please."
I have told you all my stories.
Oh.
Now these stories are yours to keep for the people.
Oh.
You will pass these stories on to your children and your children's children, and other stories will be added to them as years go by.
Oh my gosh.
Where there are stories,
Yes.
there will always be more stories.
More stories.
That's my story. No.
And so it was that stories came into our world. Many people tell stories these days to guide us in right action and to give us experiences we might not otherwise have. And today, when people hear stories and a storyteller is finished with his story, people always give thanks, just as the girl thanked the story-sharing cedar tree in those days, long, long ago. And that's the story. Hello, I am Uncle Peter, and I love telling true and magical stories. By a show of hands, how many of you out there actually like stories? Oh my gosh, look at that. All of you like stories? Oh, well, we better get on with it then. I've got several here with me. So we'll just have to tell a few more, if you don't mind. I've got one right here, in fact. You'll like this one. This is a wonderful story. They're all pretty good, though, I must say. Whoop, not you. This one's eager. It's a very eager story. That bird is a Swainson's thrush. Beautiful song, don't you think? Oh, yes. Well, you know, there are many stories handed down by the native people explaining the presence of Mount Rainier. A long, long time ago, the peaks of Powhatan were a proud and happy group of mountains living on the Olympic Peninsula, nearly surrounded by beautiful, pristine waters. One of the warrior peaks was named Swilloops. He and a maiden peak named Taco Bud fell in love, and they were married. Well, then, there were even more peaks, and each of the peaks seemed to be growing bigger and stronger, as young peaks are known to do. Well, at last it became very crowded on her small peninsula. Taco Bud especially had grown both taller and broader. It was so crowded that Taco Bud said to the others, "I will go to a place that is not so crowded, and then there will be more room for the rest of you." She spoke to the rising sun. She said, "Over there are no mountains. I will move over there and I will give myself plenty of room." And when she went, she said to herself that she would take salmon and berries so that when people came, they'd have plenty to eat. And she brought with her also cedar for the land and the salmon. Well, the peaks of Powhatan had grown quite tangled and close together, and Taco Bud found it difficult to uproot herself, but at last, she freed herself and moved across the sound. There, she gave herself plenty of room, and she grew taller and taller and broader and broader. And today she is truly a great mountain. She is Mount Rainier, the Queen of the Cascades. And some say, stop with the Swainson's thrush, you're lovely, I know. Some say that Swilloops also moved across the waters and became Mount Baker, the king of the Cascades. What do you think? So that's the story of how Mount Rainier came to be where she is. And let's see, y'all know Aesop? Aesop's fables. He lived 2,500 years ago, and he was born into a family of slaves. He was a slave child, but his second owner, a king, gave him his freedom, and he did it because Aesop proved to be very, very intelligent and very clever with his words. Hence, we have all these wonderful Aesop's fables. One of my favorites tells a couple of good morals, for me anyway, and it is The Lion and the Mouse. Anybody know that story, The Lion and the Mouse? Well, I think you're going to like this version too. Here we go. One day, a lion was taking a nap, and a little mouse began running up and down his back, up and down his back, up and down his back. Well, what do you suppose happened? Well, of course, the lion woke up, and he took his great big paw, and he snagged that little mouse's tail. He was just about to take a big bite when the mouse jumped up and said, pardon me, oh, forgive me, great king, I'll never do it again, I promise. If you don't eat me this time, you never know, maybe sometime I'll be able to do some nice thing for you. Please don't eat me. Ho, 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 said the lion. He was tickled by the idea that a mouse might ever be able to do the king of beasts a favor. He was so tickled by it that he did a good deed himself, and let the little guy go. Oh, thank you, great king. Thank you. You won't regret it. And the mouse scampered off. Well, as fate would have it, a few days later, maybe a week or a week and a half or so, the lion was trapped by some hunters and caught and in a net. And they wanted to take him to the king of the land. Perhaps they would get a great reward. So they went off in search of a cart to haul the lion, and our little mouse came by. He walked right up to the lion, and he says, and he began gnawing away at the ropes that held the lion captive. And in just a few minutes, the lion was freed by our industrious little mouse, who said, "See what I mean? If you would have eaten me last week, I wouldn't be here to save you today." And now we are both able to go enjoy our lives together free. "Thank you," said the lion, and off they went. Well, there are two morals to this Aesop's fable for me, maybe others for you as well. My two are: one, little friends can grow to be great big helpers in a short while. Little friends can grow to be great big helpers. And the other one is, you just never know what good will come from our good deeds. You let him go. And the mouse came back to be his salvation. So you never know what good will come from our good deeds. Well, the end. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh my. Oh, you know, my next story is about geology. Now, I understand geology is thought to be a slow subject, but I think you'll find this quite interesting. It's a story that's very close to home, in fact. It's called "The Big Water is Coming." Rivers are escape routes for water on its way to sea level. Each tiny moisture droplet has the same goal: to return to Mother Ocean at sea level. Snowflakes and dewdrops join with raindrops and other moistures, first in small puddles, and then in little rivulets and streams and creeks and babbling brooks, and eventually rivers. And as it builds in volume with its common mission, water becomes an unstoppable force, a force that is able to even carve rock. This is a story of another time when Earth's climate was warming. It's a story of places we know today as the Scablands, the Palouse, Potholes, and the Columbia River Gorge. Geologists tell of a series of enormous floods that ran through the Palouse and down the Columbia River out to the Pacific Ocean about 15 to 20,000 years ago. These are the Ice Age floods of glacial Lake Missoula. Oh, really? Why did you stop? Glacial Lake Missoula, that's a cue. Oh, stop. No way. All right, I'll just tell the story. It's a fun story. Just tell the story. Glacial Lake Missoula floods. Toward the end of the Pleistocene era, a giant ice sheet flowed south and blocked the Clark Fork River at the base of the Bitterroot Mountains at a place we now know as Sandpoint, Idaho. Behind this dam, the immense glacial Lake Missoula grew to be more than 100 miles long and 30 miles wide. A lake so big that where Missoula, Montana stands today was under 1,000 feet of water. And when the gargantuan lake could no longer be held back by the dam, it blew out, and twice as much water as in all of today's Lake Michigan thundered out onto the Palouse of eastern Washington. It was powerful. It was big water. In fact, as far south as Yakima, the animals could feel the water coming through the earth. It was shaking and rumbling, and some could hear its thunder on the wind. They knew the big water is coming. Herds by the hundreds run south and zigzag up steep basalt cliffs to the ridges above in order to escape the water. Great clouds of rock and dust fill the air, and the sound of thundering hooves is drowned out by the bone-shaking rumble of water as it crashes down valley. Woolly mammoths stampede, but they cannot outrun the mountain of water. And then flying high above, Condor sees a stallion take a wrong turn and lead his mares into a dead-end box canyon. Oh, she calls out her warning as the water begins to swirl around them, dark and bubbling. But then they spy an escape route, and they gather up their horse courage and begin climbing the crumbling basalt cliff until they get to the ridge above. Fortunately, they're able to climb faster than the water rises, and soon they're high above the floodwaters on a plateau known then and now as Horse Heaven Hills. A saber-toothed tiger watches a bear family struggle in the water. Oh, the little ones won't be able to do this for long. But then a giant brown bear climbs aboard one of the huge icebergs, size of a small house. These icebergs are all around this flooded water. It's just blowing out the ice dam. And then a smaller bear, a younger one, maybe the mother, grabs the baby bears and tosses them up to the giant 9-footer on the huge iceberg. And over time, all three are saved. But then the mother bear drifts off. She's exhausted. She drifts off into the evening's gathering gloom. But she'll be back. Now, to the west, to the east, there's a mile-wide break in the plateau so the water can shoot through it like being shot through a cannon. And it overflows the Columbia River on its trip down to the Pacific Ocean. And, you know, water in a river travels much faster on the surface than it does underneath. And with all this water, there's huge turbulence that builds up, and it roils and digs at the walls of the river channel. It's running at freeway speeds now, 60 miles an hour on the surface, and it's creating all this turbulence, tearing the rocks from the walls, and it carves the Columbia River Gorge. That's how that gorge was made. And the water goes all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. Condor goes out to watch it as the water finally reaches sea level and Mother Ocean. After bringing topsoil from eastern Washington all the way south to Eugene, Oregon. My goodness, they say that a man can't dig to bedrock in Eugene in less than a day with a shovel because there's so much topsoil. That's why Willamette Valley is so rich, and why our eastern Washington is so kind of like land poor, or was for a long time. And so, oh, wait a second, is that a family of brown bear over there in the receding waters? Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Their iceberg raft finally came to rest after their roller coaster journey. It's about 3 days coming down from up above, and this river changed the face of the West forever. Changed all of that land forever. And you can go see that story now live in eastern Washington, and it's interpreted by the National Park Service as the National Geologic Trail. And so there's a great deal of interpretation and story building on this story, and some beautiful paintings of what it must have been like. And you can see that at places like Dry Falls over there and Palouse Falls. So that's just a wonderful, wonderful big story. It's the biggest geologic story I know. The end. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I wish I knew what was going on with our audio today. And we're about to find out. We have one more story. You got one more story in you? I'd love to tell you one more. This is a story of something that actually happened to me. And after I saw this event, a voice in my heart said, "You really ought to write that down. You really ought to write that down." So I did. And this is what I wrote. not what I wrote. This is what I wrote. Sitting on my porch, enjoying a sunny morning on the farm, I was watching our horses, River and Paisano, as they munched our nearby pasture. A shadow passed across the grass. When I looked up, I saw Eagle gliding toward a line of trees to the west. Eagle's route became a circle, and he circled around the sun. And then his circle included me. Oh, it was amazing. And then he lingered above a line of trees, gracefully gaining altitude. You know, his fingertipped wings never moved the entire time I admired him. Shortly, he wriggled his tail feathers, banked to the left, and headed south. Just as he did so, another eagle came in from the west. This fellow began to go south, following the first, but then turned and circled so as to circle the sun quite closely. I had to squint and was still kind of blinded by the light. And then Eagle, without even the flap of wing, Eagle 2 joined up with Eagle 1, and together they continued their southward journey. I feel as though my land and I are doubly blessed this day. Would it have been so if I hadn't been here to see it? I'll never know. Perhaps it was a message I've been hoping for. My daughter Samantha and my grandson Cedar will be moving on to the land soon to live in the lower house. We saw salmon in the creek on my birthday. The air is still. The vibrant forest I live in is peaceful today. My heart is happy. I am experiencing extreme joy. I'm glad to have these stories to share with you and to have had this story particularly to end our story time today with. I am Uncle Peter, and it's Labor Day weekend. I encourage everybody to get out and have a good time, and I'll be back next Friday with more stories. Thank you very much. This is the one